it's hard for me to assume that anyone would believe that that could actually happen, because you have such a big delay, and then you're calling 911 and you're saying there's an unconscious person. You are asking me to suspend my belief that you are normal at all.
And here we go. Welcome to the Freak Show, the best in town.
How are you doing?
We are so good, and we are so excited to be here with you guys tonight.
Thanks for having us.
Can you give a little bit of a background on yourself? So you guys have the #1 radio show on the biggest country music station, and you guys are also full-time custody lawyers.
So Sam and I actually met, I'm Kristen, and Sam and I met over a decade ago, and she actually applied to an ad that I was running for. We were running attorney ads, legal assistants, and I was a fairly new attorney, only a couple years in, on Craigslist. And the funniest part about that story is I yelled at my staff for putting ads on Craigslist, because you never know what you're going to get. And then I got Sam.
So I'm the Craigslist hire, notoriously at the firm. Kristen and I have been working together now for 11 years. I just had my work anniversary. Whoop.
Congrats.
And yeah, it's been just a bunch of fun. We are California family certified family law specialists. So by day, we really are in the weeds with divorce cases, custody, restraining orders, all that good stuff. And then after hours, we've really been getting into some other stuff. Kristen and I are also, as Birdie, thanks for mentioning that, but Kristen and I also have a radio show that airs on Go Country and also streaming platforms. Go Country has it, I think it's 8:30 a.m. every Saturday. So that's a bunch of fun, and we're just happy to be here.
Kristen, you had kind of said a little bit of a background on how you found the Hive. It was kind of random. Didn't you say you were picking up like food or something for your family one night? You were waiting for it to get done, and that's how you found us?
I think I had watched the couple that are on Prime, and I don't even think the Dateline, or the very first Dateline. I was like, he did it. Oh my gosh, what? This is crazy. And I'm deep diving into the victims, and I'm trying to find all these clips. Birdie was the very first show that I started watching. It was Father's Day, and my husband wanted wings. And of course I placed an order, and then I get there and it wasn't ready. So I think it was the day that Birdie was launching Discord. And I watched his entire live. I will say, you guys, your comments, your analysis, it really got me to go, wait, that doesn't make sense.
Yeah. And then she was in my office, not talking about custody. And I was like, all right, we might have taken this too far. She's like, no, you don't understand. My husband doesn't know anything. Let me plead my case.
What did you think about it or know about the case before Kristen was kind of blowing you up with the Hive's stuff?
So I think I was much more cautious than Kristen. I kind of like to sit back and think it all over before I start kind of going, okay, there's red flags here. And I was really thinking that I wasn't going to formulate too much of an opinion until the trial started, candidly.
Can you comment on Olivia's victim impact statement?
Listen to her speech. I've actually listened to it many, many, many times. One, I think she's probably a very, very intelligent person in the book world and with smarts with respect to education. She's
well-spoken for sure.
Yeah, she's well-spoken. She analyzes. She's analytical. She puts really good sentences together. Apparently, she had rewritten that speech a few times. I'm not going to lie. She kind of knocked me off. Like, whoa. With all of this stuff coming to light, and people, I think there's more and more people actually questioning the whole thing, right? The timeline, the math ain't mathin'. Okay. And I think from when I started watching in February, I was telling Sam this the other day, to where I'm watching now, the comments of the people that were questioning it were few and far between if you were in more of a neutral podcast. Okay, now I'm seeing in TikTok and even Instagram and all, now that we're getting our stuff going, there's a lot more comments saying that's not right. Why are you recording this? I mean, I watched a podcast the other day, and I'm not going to say who it was, but it was the worst reporting of this case that I have ever seen on YouTube, and people were just eating them alive. But that's becoming the norm now, right?
Right.
It's, no, you're wrong. Show me this. Okay, so don't you think that with all this coming out, don't you think potentially that some of these more outspoken victims' families potentially might be turning a little bit and not doubling down?
I would sum it up very simply. It doesn't make sense from a human instinct standpoint. There's grieving in different ways. For example, I've said, like with my father, he was sick for 6 years. We knew it was coming, and it was still very hard. You get to watch kids grow up. It was expected. We're talking about kids in the prime, about to enter the prime of their life, killed in a gruesome way, brutally. Nobody knows who it is for how long. The police chief can't even give a press conference right away. And when they do, they say one of the victims' names wrong. There's grieving. And then there's like, holy hell. I guess I would just say something feels off, and it's not the grief. It's not the stages of grief. It's not what people want to shame you for and say, let them grieve and heal. Well, okay. Why are you going to question somebody who's talking to hundreds, but you're not going to question the mainstream media who's broadcasting this to millions. I've never understood that.
I couldn't make a determination without a reasonable doubt that this couldn't have happened. I mean, I still have so many questions. I don't know that we will ever truly get some of our questions answered.
So I've also seen a lot of questions talk about this 8-hour delay. When you hear something in a story that you might hear or you've talked about with custody many times, and then you hear this outlier, right? Whether it's true or not, you have to have the ability to ask these questions to them, right? Like, you do realize how uncommon it probably is in a paper thin house that creaks and is a college house to not hear 4 people where now, after we see their autopsies, they clearly fought for their damn lives for a while. You know what I mean? Like they struggled to not hear anything. And then now to have it come out in the police reports. Like, what are your guys' thoughts on that whole delay and the initial narrative push behind it?
It's hard for me to assume that anyone would believe that could actually happen, because you have such a big delay, and then you're calling 911 and you're saying there's an unconscious person. You are asking me to suspend my belief that you are normal at all. And there's not one but 2 people that are alive in the house. So we now have to suspend the belief for 2 people, right? Like, I don't know, one oddball, I guess theoretically, like you said, okay, assuming it could theoretically happen in the universe, there's too many of those that you have to then have me string together. I have to do that. I have to look at the gap in time. I have to look at the lack of real evidence pointing to BK. I have to look at and listen to how odd the 911 call sounded. I have to string together so many things to make it make sense that it's confusing to me that people are essentially being shamed for looking at alternative theories other than what the prosecution had. Like, oh, you're, slapped with, I'm a conspiracy theorist now just because, this happened. And I just don't know how anyone could believe it. I think it's really wild to assume that it could be accurate at all.
And you're shamed. You're shamed for it.
Well, that goes, get me in my little porch and I'll scream to that's what I don't like, is because then it's like we go there and we say, hey, the media is saying one thing or a series of things and we're supposed to believe it and like just deal with it. And then we also have the media saying, and anything else you hear, ignore that too. Like, what a good way to make sure that no one else continues to look into things by being like, oh, well, if you think that, then you must be crazy. I think, how can you possibly, and sometimes I'm along with the media, but in this case, how can you possibly say that it's not the weirdest thing you've ever heard that somebody waited 8 hours? You could watch the Titanic 3 times and then call the police. It's an insane amount of time.
That's an awesome quote. Literally, you could watch the Titanic 3 times before you called 911 after a quadruple homicide.
That's a long time.
It's like an entire workday. I mean, for people that work, 9 to 5, 8:30 to 5, that's an entire workday. So there were 3 things I could not get past. And honestly, the 911 call is still to this day one of the biggest things I could not get over to following, the mainstream media's storyline. I think they are trying to push a square into a round hole, and they're trying to make the story now fit with their conclusion. And the evidence that now that it's coming out, I think it was a lot easier to do when everything was under the gag order. It was a lot easier. Okay. We only knew things that were leaked and if that was actually true.
We got a special guest in the Hive that tunes in regularly. They are on the Moscow Police Department. It's Detective Bowery. He also apparently tries to hit on my mom every time he sees her. It's a troll account. But
it's like,
yeah, no, I'm joking. So anyways,
you did not prepare us for that.
No, this Detective Bowery is a menace, but he actually has stepped up his game with this question, as much as that hurts my heart to have to say that. But he says, ladies, given the vast amount of information, phones, social media now being used in criminal court, does requesting a statutory speedy trial actually give the defendant an advantage in this case?
Potentially. I mean, and I think that that's part of why you have a right to a speedy trial, is because the longer that it goes on, the worse that it can get, right? And so I think it's actually a great question. I agree. Because that's
a top dog. It hurts my heart, but whatever.
But that's part of this whole like orchestra of things that are going on, right? There's the attorneys, there's the charges, there's the discovery, there's all these preliminary motions where everyone's fighting about evidence. And then there's also this clock ticking. And the longer that you wait, not only is your client potentially incarcerated during that time, but you could also be, it's possible, especially in these cases, that you want the media to help your case for a particular thing. And you could be losing the media. And so you could be saying, hey, no, I think I need a speedy trial. And since you have a right to it, that might be a good play, but it could also be risky because you don't know what the defense's total case is. Is the defense's case, I didn't do it? Is it someone else did it? And is there, the more time that goes on, is there something else that could maybe allow you to develop a different theory even?
Yeah.
And look at this case. I mean, look at how a lot of us have changed their theory over time. But I'll tell you a perfect example. Sam and I were actually in the courthouse not too long ago. That baby Emmanuel, that 7-month-old baby that the mom claimed he was abducted. We were actually in the courthouse just watching as guests, as public. And Jake, the dad, who had initially said that their baby was abducted, didn't pass the smell test with me from the very first second of watching that. Okay, and then the dad said that that the baby might have accidentally died, or he rolled on him, and then he actually admitted in a jail cell under the Perkins operation to an informant that the baby was dead. But in that exact case, Jake changed his plea from not guilty to guilty in the middle of the hearing. Right? Nobody anticipated. We were there for a validity hearing. The judge, prosecution, nobody knew. And why do you think that Rebecca Harrow's attorney this is the wife, was so insistent on sticking with that speedy trial? No, Your Honor, we want to make sure that that's within the confines of that, my client's right to a speedy trial, because they were waiting for discovery. They were waiting for medical records. And now they have a witness.
And they don't have the baby. They don't have the body. They don't have the body.
You don't need a body.
You don't need a body, but you probably want to go to a speedy trial before one comes up.
Yeah. Probably before this guy. Right now, Jake's in his guilt phase, right? He still loves his wife. She was definitely, in my opinion, the victim of domestic violence, and they both probably had some serious mental health issues, but he probably still feels really bad with what he did, because now he's telling the world he did it, right? He's crying in the courtroom. Oh, you want that trial to go through before he is offered $1 million maybe benefits or accommodations through the system if he is the star witness for the prosecution against his wife.
Damn.
Because she's still saying, I'm not guilty.
So
she's holding to it.
This kind of, Mark, thank you for the super chat, had asked, and it kind of goes along with this as far as evidence, right? So you're saying like the right to the speedy trial before discovery. Mark had said, I've always wondered why Anne didn't use the figure in black, leaving Linda Lane at 4:20 a.m. I'm going to take that and kind of broaden it. There's a lot
of things I wonder why weren't brought to the court.
Well, and that's where I was going with the question, is kind of like, is there ever a strategy on why, even though we as the public are looking at it, and you as the attorney probably know it could be helpful, is it because it might open up the state to a certain objective theory that could hurt your overall working theory as to prove innocence? Or why would they hold that close to the vest?
Well, they may not want to know, the prosecution know that they have that because they haven't exchanged everything. And there's a lot of strategy. Being an attorney and a trial attorney is half about knowing the law, like I talked about, and the other half of presenting and putting on the show. But there are a lot of things that I couldn't quite figure out completely. Sam and I would talk a lot about it, going, why is this not here? But I do think you're right that they were probably keeping a lot of those things close to their vest and waiting for a cross-examination. But I do think it would have been advantageous for some of the alternative suspect to get, and again, we still haven't read all of the documents that have been disclosed because a lot are redacted still. They're not giving us as much as everyone thinks they are. They're actually giving us pieces.
Well, and I also think that a lot of times people don't necessarily want to believe that your case can be like won or lost based on your attorney, how they're presenting the case that they're furthering. And so people make mistakes. And I'm not saying this is a mistake per se. I'm just saying that you can be so enwrapped in a particular theory that maybe you're not including everything that you could or should have. Like that's part of the courthouse. It's a show, right? The prosecution's job is to paint this little picture of what happened, which is why I think even though we technically have a plea deal and a conviction, it's like, well, even if you buy that it was him or partially him, like you still don't know the story behind it. Does it make the story magically right because there was a deal? And the same thing's true with the defense. It's like you could be making this fantastic alternative story and like this piece of evidence doesn't make sense in that and this, and you could be making bad calls right and left, but like still trying to make it make sense.
Yeah. And
remember, you're just trying to muddy the waters. You, as a defense attorney, you are not trying to prove that one of those theories 100% was it, right? Because there are multiple.
Yes.
What you're trying to do is give one piece of reasonable doubt that it could have been any of the four, and you're trying to get that to the masses. And I think that's what I would have done differently if the custody queens were representing Brian. But I think you can't unring the bell. So the more you say things, the more you repeat things, you are getting that theory out there. But when you are hanging your hat on one theory, and if you go down or they have good evidence or an expert that can refute that or minimize it, all you're trying to do is just get one thing to stick that it could have been any of these things.
Yeah.
I can tell you I still have theories. Fight night. Linda Lane. I mean, there are how many? What was the stinging? Was it to cover up Linda Lane? Like, I still have so many questions, but what is the conclusion? That because I have so many questions, it could have been any of these things.
It's reasonable doubt to the point where I've said this, the entire state of Idaho could drown in the reasonable doubt in this case. And the fact that people don't see this because, Nancy Grace, Ashley Banfield, Brian Enton, amongst however many other mainstream sources have pushed this out. It goes to, yet again, another Detective Mowry question. I can't find it, but it flew by where he had said, at what point does the judge or even the prosecutor have to correct this misinformation, disinformation from the media? Is there ever a time where they would have to do that from an ethics standpoint?
Well, I think that, of course, we're not licensed attorneys in Idaho, but I think really the vantage point of the judge is they have to protect the trial. And so they have to protect the evidence that is being admitted. That's why there's a lot of stuff behind closed doors. There's an exchange of evidence. There's what's getting in. And then it's trying to make sure that you have a representative sample of your community, that's your jurors, that aren't tainted by the media, which I think is like basically impossible in this day and age. But that's the game that we're still playing, is within that. So if media becomes too much, if media is compromising the trial, then there are circumstances where the court will make certain calls, excluding the media, for example. But that's not the case that we necessarily have. I think with this day and age, with so much social media, again, you're going to find the guy under the rock that you probably don't want on the jury anyways is the only guy left that can actually be on this jury without already having formulated an opinion. These are all like very real people too, right? That are in there. Or like are lying, it's like you don't want to accuse anyone of like not doing their like public service as a juror, but like how many people do you think would like be in Idaho and want to be on this case? Like, yeah.
Or how many people might move to Idaho?
Like, you can never prove those things, which is the frustration. And you want to believe that like everything is going to go as smoothly as possible. Like you believe in the Constitution and your right to a fair trial, and these are the rules and blah, blah, blah. But like you can't always catch where the rules fall through. And like there's things that happen if like you find a juror is compromised, for example, then they're off the jury, or you could have a mistrial.
Yeah, you got to.
Like, those things exist, but like I just think knowing that there's such a human element to a trial, which I don't know how you get around the human element. I think it's silly to assume that every trial is truly fair, even if everyone's trying to make it fair.
Yeah.
I've never seen a judge get out in the media and say this is being disseminated to the mass public by News Nation, TMNT, whatever it is, and it is not true. They are the trier of fact, like Sam said, over is this evidence coming in? Like, for instance, Hitler, he was the trier of fact of whether or not he was going to allow the defense to present. He allowed her to present what they had, the arguments and the evidence of the alternative suspects. He read it. He said, I don't think you have enough. I don't think you have anything more than what everybody has. And I don't think it's enough to go ruin someone's life to see if it sticks. But he was the trier of that fact. Now, whether or not there was an alternative suspect, he's not going to go get on the steps of the courthouse and say, everyone, there were alternative suspects and I should have let that come in. So the media has freedom of speech. I saw that in one of the comments. That is true. And each, depending where the media is coming from, they're going to be one way or the other. What's more lucrative for their position, their partners, and their bottom line.
Right. What you just said about Hitler and these alt suspects, isn't it kind of interesting that nobody has really called it out? The fact that Hitler said, no, we're not going to ruin anybody's life because it's nothing more than what we have on Brian. Why wouldn't Brian be in that basket then?
Why wouldn't he be given that
same treatment?
Benefit? Yep. Honestly, not letting that in. I mean, granted, again, we haven't seen the evidence but just knowing what we have all seen of what I believe is actually good evidence versus, being modified or changed that wouldn't be admissible. I would be really curious to see what was submitted because I cannot understand for the life of me, Sam and I have talked about this a lot, how there was not a full evidentiary hearing on all of this evidence.
Can we put our tinfoil hats on? Are you guys okay with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. You guys are doing great, by the way. And the comments in the chat, thank you guys for all the questions. Please continue to send them. I'll keep putting them up on screen. I kind of want to shift kind of the lens we look through here. And that is, we just talked about all of these reasons why these two attorneys who have seen stuff, they're having to, figure out what's a he said, she said in custody battles. Yes, it might not be criminal court, but at the kind of the common denominator is who's reliable, who's not, what's the evidence, who's lying, who's a good, witness, who's not, is the judge biased? Are they in a bad mood? Is the prosecutor using dirty tricks, etc.? You guys get my point. Now let's put on the tinfoil hat. We're seeing all of those same things in the Idaho 4. Given all of the rumors that you had said, Kristen, with you got the prison gang, you got the frats, you got like the fight night, you got the university, you got a countless number of things where I'd said there's so much reasonable doubt you could drown in it. How do all of those happen separately, yet not just in the media get tied into a perfectly tied bow, but in the courtroom, what you just said, you're shocked it didn't go to a trial is mind-boggling to the point where you have to start to put on the table where you said in the beginning too, Sam, not the entire discussion in the court is made public. Bryan Kohberger pleas out of nowhere makes no sense. Family threats.
And there's so many assumptions out there. There's so many assumptions that really are grossly inaccurate.
Are the feds involved in this? Is this an operation? Would they do that? And would Ann Taylor, let's just say this is my tinfoil hat question, rather than speculating so much. If there was an operation from what you guys know, is Ann Taylor brought up to speed on that? Like, let's say that Bryan is deep undercover and he's tracking the routes of these drug trafficking mules. And that's why his phone's pinging 23 times off a tower during those time periods because he's tailing Molly, the DoorDash driver. And they have all of these things that could put him there, but he obviously never went in the house. The prosecutor says, we can't put him in the house. We don't know the connection to the victims. There's not one. We wanted there to be. And his criminology past isn't anything out of the normal. Destroys the narrative. Do you think in a case like that, is Ann Taylor brought up to speed? Or do you think they purposely leave it out for like compartmentalization? Whether or not you guys have experienced that, maybe just an opinion answer.
Theoretically, I don't think that Ann would. If putting my tinfoil hat on and guessing, I don't think that I think she would just feel like she's getting her head banged against the wall and that the judge is completely biased and that the media is against her client. I think when you open that circle to more than 3 people, like how so many people, I think, know what happened that night. Why is really no one talking? I think it's the same thing. If you start telling multiple people and they're in on the whole propaganda, there's no way it's going to stay secret. So I don't think she would know.
So here's my answer. I would say that if I was the FBI and assuming that I was doing this, that I would not want to have anyone know anything other than if they need to know it. And so I don't know if she would need to know it to get a guilty plea / conviction, right? I just don't know if that's the thing. But you would think that if you were going to keep this as tight as you want to,
that is genuine, and it's genuine, the process.
Everyone would be in a need to know basis. Like person A would know something that person B doesn't. And then person B would only know what they need to know. And that's how you would keep it as secret as you need to keep it. Otherwise, you would assume that a ton of stuff about the FBI, CIA, whatever it is, we would all know it. It would be easier for us to track. Like we undoubtedly don't understand exactly how that movement works or whether she would be a person that would need to know that fact to get the conviction. I'm not sure that she would need to know that fact.
I don't think she would either. And then I think it would really diminish the organic basis of her defense because she was annoyed. She was frustrated. You could see it on her face. You could see it when she was doing oral arguments. Like there was like just defeat. Like I think if she knew any of it, I think it would really make it more of an act. She would be acting. And I think it would really lose a lot of the genuine authenticness from her performance. But now I can say, hey, why didn't you not really scream to the rooftops? And for anyone saying, why didn't she go out there and scream? You would have been handcuffed and you would have been put in jail and she no longer would be representing him. As officers of court, which attorneys are, we have a code of conduct that we have to comply with. Now, do I think there would have been better ways to get her points across sometimes with a change of tone or a good cop, bad cop with 2 attorneys? I mean, Sam and I do that sometimes. She'll go, oh, my partner's just so reasonable. Let me see if I can talk to you and we can carve something. And I'm the one, throwing the fit and being super unreasonable. A lot of it, again, is strategy. It is so much goes into it, or I'm spilling something and I'm distracting. But a lot of it, people don't realize that's me and Sam. Like, we can look at each other's eyes and know like who's going to finish my sentence. But it's strategy. And I think that was lacking on their defense team. I think it lacked so much emotion.
Yeah, I think you're right with the authenticness. And I think one of the comparisons that we could maybe make from, quote, victims or survivors to Ann Taylor hasn't been seen in the media having to play a role at all. So her authenticness is holding true. Whereas there are some things where I've talked about Steve G and Chrissy in front of the Moscow PD a month before Kohberger is arrested, talking about they could just get some family lineage company out here and start testing it. Or like, oh, Did they narrative plant, or did they just plant a little seed in the narrative that they're going to use IGG to find Brian Kober? Like, you do have to start to wonder that, because then it plays out exactly.
He said, I can't remember what hearing. It was after one of the hearings. And he said something like, I know how the dad knows. And he was inferring that the dad knew something because he flew out, right? That got my brain going. And then he's also claiming he knows nothing, and they have been very selective with the information, and the families have not been treated with any special, attentiveness. So sometimes I'm like, sometimes I'm sitting there figuring out, like, what does he know? What doesn't he know? Is this an act? And I think the same thing. Yeah, sometimes I think it's very, very genuine, and she lost her sister, and it hurts deep in her soul, and this is truly how her emotions come out. Sometimes I'm like, just seems calculated.
Why do you think that there's not a line out the door of that prison to try to help Ann Taylor and her defense team and Brian Koberger right now?
I think there's a lot more that we don't know. I think that she has been working, but she still has attorney of record. She still has attorney of record. She will be at the hearing next week. And there's so many assumptions of what that hearing is about. But I think that she has probably very diligently been working with some sort of innocence project. And they need a very, very big one that has the funds and the backers. But I watched I think it was Netflix. It was called Outcry, and it was about a man that was convicted of a crime that he didn't do, and the appellate, it was the same thing. And he was convicted, and he did 4 years, and then the Innocence Project came in, and I think it took another 3 years, but he was ultimately completely exonerated. But the evidence that this firm was able to collect, and really this attorney, it was phenomenal. And so I think we're going to see that. Sam, what do you think?
I completely agree with you. When I think of like other reasons why other attorneys wouldn't be lining up, I think that there's a bunch of different reasons. Like they don't want to be involved because what they've seen maybe sounds like it might be a lot more nefarious, and they just don't want to be involved in that. Probably not going to get paid. The media is very dead to rights on this, and it's already been convicted. So is this like a great move for your career? I think there's like a ton of reasons why people wouldn't come forward, which is, I think, the sad thing.
Well,
it's got to be someone with deep pockets. It's got to be someone with deep pockets that has partners, that has the financial backing, because the amount that would have to go, and you're starting from scratch, almost completely reinvestigating the case. And you're trying to find answers to the questions that we all have.
What do you think a trial like this would cost a firm?
Millions.
Like how many?
It's like a lot of money, because you have to think. So the part of it where you're saying, okay, we see these court hearings, but there's so much behind the scene. Most people have a team or a firm. There's 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 people working on a case. It depends on how big it is. It could be double that, and they're all working at their hourly rates. So it adds up very quick. And then you have to think about too, like the experts involved and the quality of the case. And is this a firm with enough money to front it? Or if it's a social cause, do they have the ability to actually do it? Is it a mom and pop shop that can't really face a prosecution because they're getting hit with discovery right and left, and they just don't have enough manpower? And all those things will have an effect on how effective your representation is. And it has to be quality criminal attorneys that are also, by the way, licensed in Idaho.
So on the Reed case, Karen Reed, I don't know how much he got paid for the second, if that was included, but he did some sort of public statement. I think he received $1 million for the first trial. Okay, I don't know what happened with the second trial. I don't know what she paid, but this is not going to be a mom and pop. How many pages, how many boxes, and what was the amount of discovery that Anne received? I know somebody in the chat knows this. It is like billions of documents, right?
It's a lot. It's a lot.
I don't even know how much it is, but I heard it's in the billions of documents that they were pages. This firm that would have to come in would have to read every single one of those pages, because what the prosecution was trying to do was to bury stuff and hide it. And they knew there was 3 of them. There was no way in heck that they were going to be able to go through 1 billion documents. So if they did disclose it, it was buried somewhere in a footnote on the back of a page. And that, I think, was a tactic. But you have to have a firm that is going to come in that probably has 100 plus attorneys, and they have the ability to front this kind of money. Yeah. My guess is it would probably be somewhere between 5 and 10 million.
5 and 10? Yeah. I mean, and it's just...
And it would be years. It would probably be a couple years.
What's your guys' Well, and I was just going to say, you said it'd probably be, years. What's your opinion from a professional standpoint on being an attorney now, maybe seeing somebody get effed over in custody court or just wrongfully convicted? What's your thoughts on the system? Do you think that it takes too long to prove a wrongful conviction? Or is it like, what's the general gist of attorneys when it comes to that regard? Truly wrongful, not getting off on a technicality like, they just got bent over the barrel, shown the 50 states, and they're in prison they shouldn't be.
Yeah, I think that it is one of the more frustrating parts of being an attorney. I can only speak for California, like family law, of course, but just my knowledge in general of seeing court hearings and things like that. Everything's very slow. It's slow to do everything. And, that's part of the right to a speedy trial. That's like one of the few things, the right to a speedy trial. But like everything else is slow. Appeals are slow. Motions are slow. Getting to trial typically is slow because both parties aren't ready to get there. So then when you have a conviction, it's even slower to then go try to undo that or go into like appeal land, which is what I call it. So I think that is very frustrating. I mean, even just from a family law aspect, a lot of times if we want to go into court, unless it's like on an emergency basis, like probably 10 to 12 weeks before you can go get like a small order. If you want to go to trial, sometimes it's 6 months, sometimes it's a year out. Sometimes you show up on the day of your trial and they're like, the judge is out today. Your trial's set for next year. Like that just happens. So It's slow. It's too slow for sure.
I had a hearing last week that my client had waited for 6 months for a custody visitation order, and the judge was out sick. And without even hearing the case, it was continued to February. And the way they look at it is is there any prejudice, to the clients, and they balance it. But a lot of times it's just a calendar thing. I think it's flawed. I think there's a lot of issues with the court system that are flawed. I think they do some things right. I think they do the best they can with some circumstances, but the appellate process is not going to happen overnight. It's going to be, unless there all of a sudden is a piece of evidence that wasn't available to them at the time of the plea deal or to anyone else, and it completely exonerates him without question. Then they might have a path that might be a little bit quicker.
I think those are both great answers. And
so we actually have a great appellate attorney that works with us, and we've convinced him that maybe we could do this again with him because he can actually walk us through that process.
Yes, and I would love that. I would absolutely love that. Whether it be your show or a second one in here, I would love that, because I think that what's tripping a lot of people up to even what Mark had just said for the super chat, thank you, is he feels like maybe it'd be deadly to help Ann, or there's threats when you have the narrative is stacked against Brian Koberger. What in a situation where there's threats, I'm sure you guys have seen that, whether it's like, don't be a witness, if it's like somebody's friend.
Oh, it's real. It's real.
What happens in that situation?
Well, we're family law attorneys, so I don't think it would surprise you that we're susceptible to dealing with people that it's not just normal people that get divorced. People that have very serious criminal backgrounds get divorced, go through custody cases, restraining orders, domestic violence. So the interesting thing about family law is that, it doesn't discriminate. There's a lot to be there. So I think in the family law realm, Kristen and I are probably kind of a little bit too antiquated to threats. So sometimes it gets a little numb, and you probably don't take it serious. Some of the things you should, and you never know, because sometimes it can get dangerous. And so the idea that potentially being involved in a case, if you think that there is something bigger going on here, something much, much bigger going on here, I think that it would be understandable that people would have great pause for that, because at the end of the day, attorneys are humans too, and they have families to go home to. And, it's probably could be a pretty sketchy situation. To be aligned
to get restraining orders to protect us before. And
wow.
Even just from people. Yeah.
Sam's been my bodyguard more times than I can count.
Well, and underqualified. Pipsqueaks, like what, 5'4"? How tall are you?
5'3 3/4.
Yes, she puts hiking heels on. I'm 6 foot flat. Okay, so I am the underqualified bodyguard. Kristen's off getting in trouble. I'm always like, get back over here.
I mean, it's so if that happens to you, or if that happens to a witness, or if that happens to the defendant, does the judge ever get looped into that?
It's more of a chamber, but look, like an attorney doesn't have to take a case now. And even public defender, I mean, I don't know entirely how it works, but they can say, I don't want this. They might no longer be a fit for that county anymore, for that job. But we get to take cases that we want. We can get off cases that we want. If I feel threatened, or if I feel like there's a breakdown in the attorney-client relationship, I immediately file a motion to remove myself from the case. Doesn't generally look good on the client. But I think a lot of what you're talking about just comes down to a balance, right? So I have 3 kids. Sam and I have a reputation. We have had many conversations about this exact issue starting the show. I am more like, I'm passionate. I want people to see what we're talking about. I think it's a very genuine and real thing. And I think what you guys have done specifically with the Hive, it turned 2 very intelligent, educated attorneys a 180. And so if I can make, and Sam can make other people have an aha moment that might not be exactly how that went down.
Yeah.
Like I said, Sam and I still have so many questions about this case, and I haven't quite figured out roles, and I hope that we all get the answers one day. But I definitely am not convinced that because Ashley Banfield says it on a press release that that's exactly what happened. I think they have a motive and a way to spin it, and I think they all have an agenda.
I love that. And like I said, you guys did amazing tonight. Thank you so much for being here. And Hive, I'm going to hop off as well with them. I will be back tomorrow night here in the Hive at 7 p.m. Central. I hope everybody has a great night. And thank you all for tuning in. Thank you, Kristen and Sam. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you, Bernie.